Right.
All right. Obviously, Mayor Rosner is home sick, so I'm gonna run the meeting tonight, but he'll participate. So I called to order the URA Board of Directors work session for February 20th, 2024. Tonight, we are discussing the Cannery PUD vacant lot discussion. Sure.
Thank you, Council President Young. Let me share the screen here. Full screen. Got that one there?
For left. Oh, wait, or medium. Right there. View.
Where's full screen? All right, thank you. So yeah, here to talk about the Cannery Square planned unit development for a work session. Just really briefly, kind of what we're talking about. So we have the Old Town Overlay District, which is separate than the Cannery PUD. So just want to clarify the difference between those two. So on the map, you can see the outline of the Old Town Overlay District. That's in purple. So we have specific code requirements for the Old Town Overlay Zone about basically getting the architecture to be early American, changes or reductions in parking, things like that. More of an urban walkable district is the sort of larger Old Town Overlay District. That's divided into two different sub-districts, Bachville and Cannery, different design standards for each of those: height, parking requirements, design, things like that. And then when we consider the Cannery PUD itself, that is the lots outlined in red here. So very specific lots within the Old Town Overlay Zone is the Cannery PUD. And so tonight we're talking about the Cannery PUD, but it is within the Old Town Overlay Zone. So zooming into the Cannery PUD lots, here are the lots. There's 10 of them total. I think we're all familiar with them. Some of them have been developed, some of them haven't. Developed lots are the Arts Center, the apartments here, and Cannery Square, and then we have some vacant lots in here as well. Just a little bit of background on the PUD itself. Approved in 2008, 2009-ish. It was a 10-lot subdivision and planned unit development. It was envisioned as a horizontal mixed-use development, so residential was a component of it, but it was not approved for vertical mixed-use development. So horizontal, meaning the housing was here on the east end, and all of these other lots were either public or civic uses or commercial uses. And so obviously part of this has been built out. The commercial portion has been built out. Some of the civic has been built out. And actually, I'd say probably none of the pure commercial has actually been built out. And as part of the development or the approval, the developer was required to do public improvements. That's how we got Columbia Street in, some improvements to Pine Street as well. And see, anything else there? Yeah, I think that's kind of the summary. Public-private partnership between the city URA and the developer. Developer is no longer involved in this project, so the city or the URA really owns all of the remaining vacant lots. And I think I have a slide of the vacant lots here. Yeah, so here are the vacant lots. All of them, again, owned by the city URA. And just to go through what the phases actually are. So I think we're all familiar with what has been built: the Art Center, Cannery Square Plaza, and also the apartments. What has not been built and what is in the approved plan, and that's kind of what we're here to talk about, is do we still agree with this plan? Should we update the plan? At a minimum, update the vision so that we can, potentially Bruce and I and other staff can engage, and you guys can as well engage with developers who are interested in these. And I think I'll just start by saying, and Bruce will get into more detail, we do have developers interested in these vacant lots. When we're giving tours for the hotel sites around town. did we actually identify this as one of the sites?
Yeah, it was in the hotel study.
So it was
Yeah.
included in as a potential site for a hotel. And, so we were showing it and actually it got a lot of interest from developers. And, that's kind of the reason why we're coming back is to say, hey, and Bruce will go over what their proposals were, soft proposals, what I call them. And here to just say, do we want to consider updating the plan or the vision so that we have more guidance as staff when we're engaging with developers? So what has not been constructed is this, what's called the west phase or the west building. In the approval, it's a one-story building of about 3,700 square feet. And one of the council goals, I think last year it might still be on here, is to do an RFP, I believe, and get some proposals for this vacant lot. So we want to talk about this one specifically and see if there's any sort of updates or thoughts on this west phase. The next one is the east building or the east phase. It's approved as a two-story commercial building of about 7,000 square feet total. Parking in the rear. And then we have the northeast phase. This one is much larger, obviously, in size. It was envisioned as multiple different options. And then the approval, it basically says there's all these different options, all commercial. There's all these different options and, see what the market is at the time. We have flexibility with what goes in there, less prescriptive than some of the other lots. And then we have the south phase of the south building here, which is also vacant, one-story commercial building of about 4,000 square feet. So again, just summarize, all the vacant lots are preliminarily approved for commercial uses of different sizes. Some parking, associated with it as well. What the process looks like is a developer would still, or the city or whoever the applicant is, would still need to come in and get final site plan approval from the city in order to, and it has to be aligned with this preliminary approval. And so that's sort of how things would work. If you guys wanted to update the vision, I think we would understand when a developer comes to us, hey, you still have to get your final approval from the city. It's not likely to be approved because our vision has changed. Therefore, developer, you need to go through an amendment of the PUD in order to build, something else. So give us some guidance in the process that would be needed for a developer. Yeah, good.
Sorry, on the east, so is the east building currently part of the Cannery Square or that vacant lot?
It's vacant.
Okay.
It's the grass. It's where the grass starts.
Okay, but so on this, we imagine that Cannery Square kind of goes along
Get in
further down.
in there. So this would be, it's a little hard to see it. Go back one there. You can't actually see it. The phase line doesn't actually match the property line, but it's basically right there.
That was my problem.
Parking would be-
Okay, great.
So that's the really brief of the current PUD approval. Again, it needs, the final approval needs to come back to the city before any development would occur. Just a few thoughts or comments on, what is possible here. The city URA owns the lots. So that gives you a lot of discretion in terms of, a sale of the property, a development agreement, you have a lot of authority as the property owner to decide what goes on this property before you sell it. In addition to that, you as the city council are the final decision maker of the planned unit development. So you also approve a development potentially after a deal is struck on the property. So you guys are in the driver's seat here. You can amend the height limitations, the uses, the setbacks, the parking requirements. It is, in my opinion, besides state law and metro code, whatever you guys want to do here.
So a typical PUD goes through planning commission. You're saying in this scenario, because it's in the URA, it would come to city council instead of planning commission?
So if there was not a change in the vision and you guys were okay with a one-story building on the west phase and exactly what's in the preliminary PUD, based on the code right now, a applicant would just need to go.
It's the site plan.
Just need to go to planning commission and get their final site plan approved, right?
If they have an agreement to acquire the dirt.
Yeah, obviously.
And so you guys sort of hold the cards before that as the city council, as the URA board to even sell the property.
And I was wrong about the PUD, I remember.
So, point of clarification, so we closed the original PUD. Is in the boundary of the new PUD are these lots in the new PUD?
URA.
URA, sorry, URA.
They're not in the URA.
Some of them might be, I always have to look at the map to be
Check, we
sure.
can double check.
But they're owned,
Yeah.
they're deeded to the URA. That's what my understanding is,
So,
correct?
but when again, point of, if, when a URA closes, the assets of that URA get transferred to the city.
So either the city or the.
Or it went to the new URA.
Yes, and we'll have to check we'll have to check the
So
deed.
is it I know it's just kind of a process, the point, but just to.
And I don't think that would change your guys' discretion as a.
It's not, it's just to.
It's a
legal.
It's a cleanup,
The
if
legal
anything.
cleanup. My vague recollection, working on the 2021 URA, is that we tried to include the URA, and maybe not every parcel, the URA parcels in downtown, in Old Town, in the boundary. Now, we had, at the very end, we had to remove property.
Yeah, it's not.
It's not in there? All right, I haven't
We'll
looked at
figure
it.
it out.
Yeah, so what it is whoever controls it is the entity that would strike the deal to sell it.
Yes, and if indeed the URA was closed.
Or to keep it.
Yes, and if URA was closed, it went to the city instead of the new URA, city council, the city owns the property and you guys have the authority on real property transactions. So, I think, again, just you guys are in the driver's seat, whether you're acting as a URA board or city council. And Bruce is gonna go over some of the proposals that we've heard and then get into whether or not those are interesting or an amendment is,
One question before that. So if the new URA owns the property and we sell the property to some, those proceeds go to the URA to do, not to. Perfect. Okay, if the city owns it though, then
The general fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Great question.
Ready for me? Okay, so as Eric mentioned, we do a number of tours, and they're usually tours of Sherwood as a whole. But depending on who the developer is that we're talking to, and if we think if they're an industrial developer, we don't take it to Old Town. Or I don't. But if there's some interest in other aspects, other opportunities in Sherwood, we're gonna definitely show them either a walking tour or a driving tour of Old Town. That's just part of our routine. And I'm gonna talk about basically 3.5 different proposals that we've had. And proposals is a very loose word here, okay? Concepts that have been suggested to us. And I'm not gonna mention any developer names at this open session, because I don't think that's appropriate. But we simply labeled it Proposal A. Proposal A, vertical mixed use. And we're only looking at the north and the northeast parcel. So it's the north side of Columbia, east of the plaza,
which is
south of the
outlined.
track.
outlined.
Oh, yeah, right, outline there, thank you. So this goes back to 2021, and some of you may recall this one. I had met with a mixed-use developer, because I think I reached out to them because they had experience in Lake Oswego. They had done something like 40,000 square foot of commercial with about 200 apartments above, a little bit different scale in downtown Oswego. That was back in 2017, they had done that. And I knew of a Multnomah Village project that they had done, so I offered them a tour. We looked all around. The only thing they really were interested in was this particular area, okay?
When you
That's
say
shown,
vertical mixed use, does that mean like?
it's above, it's residential above commercial
Okay.
in a single building. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
that's-
glad you asked that. So,
The
we-
mayor has a question.
oh, the mayor, I can't see.
Go ahead,
Go ahead,
Mayor.
Tim.
No, we're talking.
Mayor, you're on mute, maybe?
Sorry, thank you. Was that the proposal we got a couple years ago where?
Yeah, that was the proposal a couple of years ago, so I was just gonna spend a moment or two on that. Anyway, we told them you couldn't do this project, you couldn't do a mixed-use project on this property because the PUD doesn't allow residential. But nevertheless, they said it's not gonna, and I think I mentioned this at the meeting some time ago, that they say it doesn't pencil, you can't just do retail without the subsidy of an apartment development. And that, they said they couldn't find equity or debt capital. This is back in 2021. So, nevertheless, they submit a pro forma to us. Okay, so we took it.
Yes, Mayor.
Oh, the mayor's talking. I'm sorry.
And I just want to clarify, because if I remember right, there was some commercial, there was apartments, but
Yeah.
they wanted to do apartments on the first floor, right?
Yeah, what they wanted to do was, at least their pro forma showed, I think it was 112 apartment units above 7,000 square feet of retail. On-site parking by the tracks. And so we took it to the URA executive session, so I'm not gonna say what was said at that point. But they decided that they just couldn't proceed with the project. So that was the first experience we had with this. But they're still out there, they're still interested, they're looking in Tigard, they're looking in Lake Oswego, they're looking different places now. They're focused on smaller cities, generally in the downtown areas. So then going to the next proposal, which is a current proposal, I use the term proposal lightly. This is also vertical mixed use proposal B, basically the same property, although not the entire property, more of the area closer to the plaza. And this particular developer focuses on mixed use, difficult sites, sometimes they're brownfield sites, but difficult sites. And they're only interested in small downtown areas, suburban communities. They don't want to develop in Portland, those kinds of things. They're interested in a mixed-use development. They're currently interested in a mixed-use development on maybe half of this north site. And what they're proposing to us is a 6,000 square foot standalone commercial building facing the plaza. Then in addition, we just call that building A. Building B is a 4-story mixed-use building just to the east of that commercial building. So that would be an actual mixed-use building. And I think what they said in there is they were looking for 25 apartments on the second, third, and fourth floor, and then something like 3,600 square foot of retail on the ground floor. And then building C, they're simply showing it's a 4-story building. We're not showing it to you on here. 25 apartments, floors 2, 3, and 4, and they were kind of silent about the first one. I think they're from the discussions, I think they're very nervous about retail over there because it isn't really a prime retail location, but to be seen. So
Is Cannery Square Apartments, is that 4 stories?
No, it's 3.
Okay.
there's 3 stories over there. Yeah, be taller. And we, again, as we always do, we told them no residential is allowed in this north and northeast zone. Nevertheless, they still continue to express an interest to us. And we said, well, the only way we could even discuss this any further is to see if the council has any interest in revising the PUD. So we're here tonight to talk about those issues. It's still active, still pending, but it's dependent upon evaluation, at least of that particular issue by the URA board. Proposal C is for either apartments or boutique hotel. And there've been different conversations. So I'm going to call it developer 1, for the lack of using a name. An experienced boutique hotel developer in this area. They've done some really, I think, some nice product, but they're also an apartment developer. We took them on a tour and they liked the potential hotel site of 99W. And so we'll see how that proceeds. They also subsequently expressed some interest in either a boutique hotel or apartments on this property here. We've never gotten a concept proposal, nothing like that at this stage. We told them again, as we always do, no apartments on this site under the PUD. Feel like a broken record. I happen to.
Under the PUD? Okay.
I mean, probably not. It would need an amendment.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's more in line with the vision.
Yeah.
So I happened to go to the Oregon Main Street Conference in Independence, I think it was in October, and talk with the company president there and said, so what's your interest? Are you interested in a boutique hotel? We haven't heard from you. And I think that was around October of 23. Or are you still looking at apartments or mixed use on the site? He said, well, we're really not interested in a boutique hotel at this location. Maybe long-term boutique hotel. Our real interest might be in some mixed use, although I don't think I didn't get a clear response, frankly, on that. So I call that non-active, an inactive project in a sense. It's not really a project, it's an inactive idea, right? Hotel developer number two is also an experienced hotel developer. They build chain hotels, but they also build unique hotels along the coast, the Oregon coast, and met him through a Washington County Visitors Association networking event, invited him to come coffee here. He said, I don't want to do a Choice or a Hilton or whatever. I'm interested only in something very unique. And so I said, well, why don't we just walk over to Cannery Square? And he said, I like that site. It has some potential to it for a boutique hotel. But he then also talked about the need for some incentives, as he's doing in another city nearby, TLT or some other kind of incentive. We didn't get into any discussion on that. And we contacted him a few times, but never gotten a return call. So I say that's an inactive potential interest. Had other developers look, other hotel developers look. I didn't really hear a lot of interest in boutique hotel on this site. But, it's the days are young, in essence, and these things can always be encouraged. We didn't know the temperature of the council in terms of.
So if you were able to go back to them and say, the council is open to the idea of a boutique hotel, there might be more interest.
Right, I would absolutely do that. If the council has an interest, we just didn't know.
Sure.
So we were just kind of playing, frankly, a little bit in the dark in that sense. So I didn't want to go too far in that kind of discussion, but I can encourage proposals, see what we get.
So I think that just summarizes, I think, pretty well, and the mayor's got his hand up, and let's go.
Sorry,
the mayor
I can't
first, and then we
see.
can get into questions.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I think a boutique hotel would be wonderful for that spot if we can get someone to do it.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't think I need to get through the discussion. Go ahead. Let's just.
I'll let Dan go first.
I've got a question for that parcel of land. Right now, it's currently, part of it is being used by Public Works and Broadband.
Yeah, thank you.
If we end up developing that, do we have a spot for that equipment to go?
When we build the new public works.
Sure. You don't need all that space, do you, Craig?
Storage containers on the schoolhouse.
Craig still likes us.
No, thank you. That's a great question. And I think I'll let Craig speak to that. And I guess from my side first, we need to meet the needs of the city first, and so if there needs to be a phased project, for example, that could be an option, but.
So I would say we need some of it, right? Once we get through the actual fiber to the home project, some of the material will go away, but we're still gonna need some of it for equipment storage.
Or somewhere, we could potentially
Doesn't have to be.
relocate it to somewhere else if we had to.
Location.
Yes. So I had one question before I give my opinion on this, but you mentioned that in the first proposal and the second one, that they were really only interested in that parcel. What is it that's drawing them to that parcel of land? Is it the old town vibe? Is
Great
it?
question. People come here and these developers come here. I've got to bring them here in essence.
Right.
Because they don't just come to Old Town on their own. Sometimes they'll tell me, I haven't been in Old Town in 10 years.
Yeah.
I don't know, 5-10 years. It's just not on the main road.
Right.
And so it has to be a destination. So what I try to do is get them to come to City Hall. And when we get them at City Hall, get them in a car or walk around. And then we talk about what's going on in Old Town in essence. And some of them are intrigued by it because it is, the architects say it has good bones and it has a lot more potential to it than it's seen at this stage.
Right.
And so I think they find it unique. It's not gotten attention in the market yet. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a hot market, a hot commodity in that sense from a real estate market perspective, because it's an unknown. And so we have to bring people here to encourage them to look at it. But I think they're seeing the opportunities in Old Town.
I'd say they like Old Town.
And I understand the want to have retail on the bottom and apartments above, because if you have retail on the bottom, retail it's gonna be offices or something,
It will never develop.
and that's not great for downtown either, so.
Yeah, the only way I would say okay to that is if we pair it with what we talked about, where we're incentivizing certain types of business, because when we look at Old Town, we have a
currently 11 salon type businesses in Old Town, right? And so it's like, well, if we're gonna get 2 more salons, is that helping anybody, right? Or other places where you go for an appointment for a destination, you know, and then you leave. And so that's my fear on the apartment stuff as well, right? Where I'm there to live, but then I go to my job somewhere else. Whereas a hotel is more of a, we're here, let's get the vibe, let's eat 3 meals a day in Old Town or the surrounding area. You know what I mean? And so that to me, that makes more sense, and especially in terms of generating foot traffic and stuff like that, because frankly, at a hotel, you usually get 1 rental car versus, you know, 2 people living in an apartment, we got 2 cars, maybe 3. And so it feels like the less cars, so I'm okay with that. I would also be super able to encourage a unique boutique hotel, like in terms of the design that looks, you know, like it really fits our vibe. So.
We go back to the map that shows all the parcels. Thank you. Was that the one? I feel like there was a better one that showed the 4 that were.
I'm sorry.
Also, you go forward one.
Skipped one. One more. Right there.
There we go. Okay. So for the big one on the upper right that we've been talking about, my first preference would be the boutique hotel, because I think that for all the reasons we've all talked about, and I won't have to repeat, like it generates the most interest. I think if that can't happen or there isn't enough interest, it won't develop unless we make it mixed use, in my opinion. It'll have to allow for residential where we just sit on it some more. And I would be in favor of combining that with the east one, like making it one. And then when we talk about the one adjacent to the art center on the other side of Pine, I don't want a building there. I feel like that totally ruins the vibe of what we've built already. Like now you can't see the art center because it's obstructed by this building. The Cannery Row, like the Cannery Square is now hemmed in by building, like it just.
Sort of
It feels weird to me, like I like Tim's idea of. Maybe at the north end, closest to the railroad tracks, you build like a replica train station, right? It's very small. Maybe it's a coffee stand or a slushy stand or whatever. And then the rest of it being just like more plaza space, and maybe you build in some built-in bed, like picnic tables and whatnot. The people from anywhere can just come and sit down and eat from any of the surrounding restaurants or places, or when they grab a coffee, they have somewhere to sit there.
Or food carts.
Or, I don't think it's big enough for a food truck. I mean, you could have, and that, to me, if you had food trucks there, it'd be more like the seasonal weekend kind, not a permanent installation.
Yeah, I think if you have a cute replica that's a fruit stand or a, you know, farm to table or a, I mean, I can't make the argument for another coffee place in our town, but you know what I mean? But a place that people, when they're making a left onto to get to the boutique hotel and they go fresh, you know, croissants there in the morning, let's go. Yeah. that's what-
Bakery type thing.
Yeah, you know, let's go there for breakfast in the morning and go on a little jog around, you know, to our trails and stuff like that, right? I can see that as being, especially as we're trying to push Gateway to Wine Country, and it's like, okay, well, you know, this is where you stay, you got a cool place with a lot of fun restaurants, and then we do tours out. I don't know, I'm feeling.
So that's what I would do with that spot, and then the third one, I don't know, that feels like maybe it's more off in the future to me. It's small, so it's not super.
South building?
Yeah. I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't feel like it's probably a lot of interest in that spot. It's not big enough.
I'm thrilled that Gene's here though, because I thought when I was on planning commission, we approved something.
Well, it didn't finalize.
Oh, did it? Okay.
You approved something for the
It
vacant
approved, but
lot.
it didn't.
For the non-city lot, for the non-city lot.
They walked. Oh, for the car. Okay.
Well, it surrounded, that's the south building.
All that green
They did all that.
Okay. All right.
And then when they encountered some obstacles and
They were done.
I guess
Okay.
just one note on that, you know, potentially there'd be an option to combine the south building lot with the larger one. We have gotten a lot of request for that, and maybe it makes then the whole thing pencil.
What you mean with the northeast?
No, with
No.
with the wetland.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
And so we've got a lot of requests.
Oh, that's interesting.
But we don't own that right
That where somebody was gonna donate.
But a lot of, yes, but a lot of the people who want to develop the wetland lot also say, can we buy this other thing from you? You know, they're interested in adding to it, so.
I somewhat agree. Oh, go ahead.
So I'm supportive of revisioning the PUD.
We have.
So just, and going through a good process to get input, on what community thinks, that obviously our crack team of staff, our crack team of planning commissioners, and others that can weigh in on ideas. The current Cannery Plaza footprint should be larger, or we should talk about it being larger.
Yeah.
The south building, I'm supportive of working with a developer, of making a cohesive vision with the private land around it. I'm supportive of not just one story, but 2 stories, certainly. But by doing if that ever were to happen, the city, because they own that corner piece, could help, just sign off on the vision of all the rest there. So that could be really cool.
Mhm.
The west building, I want, input on what people think. If it's a structure, and that's gonna house a business, it has to be in a form that can be successful. Whatever that means. You don't wanna build something if if the city built it, or a private enterprise built it and it couldn't support a successful business, that'd be a problem. Then the east and northeast, a boutique hotel could be really great. If that, and could be open to conversations about incentives. Or mixed use, where you've got a lot of ground floor retail. And then the mass of housing of whatever type above, it just has to be survivable, in the area, so we're not creating a bad neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is too, is like, you need more people, if to create viable old town businesses, you need more people living in and near Old Town too, right?
Yep.
Like that you can't really get one without the other. On the incentive part, I'd be willing to do a lot of incentives for the boutique hotel idea. I'd be willing to do less for mixed use, but not unwilling.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, but my feeling on that is that you need it is a cat and mouse game a little bit, where people will live downtown if there are some of the businesses that they need on the drop-in basis, right? You can't just say, okay, well, I need 11 salons down here, right? And so that's, because you're only gonna use one every 3 or 4 months, right? And the lawyers and the insurance company.
I mean, we can only dictate that if we continue to own the property in our landlords.
Well, no, but what I'm saying though is that if we pair this with the city council goal of saying, and we haven't gotten a final proposal or anything of this, but Tigard has a matrix where they say, hey, for these types of businesses, we'll throw in 20,000.
Oh, yeah, okay, you're talking about once it's built, the business.
Yeah, but so we pair it with that to say, hey, you know what, if we had, or frankly, if we say to Rainbow Market, hey, we'll help some
I was talking about development incentives, not resident, not occupancy incentives. Like, to me, I'd be willing to give more development incentives to a boutique hotel than I would be for a mixed use development.
Okay.
But I would be willing to give incentives for both, because I think both work, but I would personally push more for
So
the.
we're running against the
Yeah,
clock
thank you.
here, and I just
Tim
want to make
has-
sure everybody had some time to input. I haven't done input yet, Renee and Tim, go ahead. Mayor?
Still on mute.
We just ignore it.
No, you can't ignore me, Keith. I know you want to. No, I agree with Keith that we need to modify our overlay or our plan here, our vision. Because if we're gonna get a boutique hotel, we need to be marketing it. I am also up for development incentives to get the hotel in here. If that's what it takes, I think as Eric mentioned in the beginning, we're in the driver's seat when it comes to that. So there's a lot we can do to encourage the right type of development. So I think getting our vision for this overlay modified so staff can go out and start marketing it in a really effective manner could mean a lot. As far as the west building goes, I agree with, I think, Doug, I think you mentioned not putting a building there. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, frankly, I'd love to see a commercially viable small building on the north side that resembled the old train station. And then I'd also cover it so you can still see through it. You can still see the art center, but it creates more space and extends our outside festival season because we have more covered space for events. Anyways, that's my 2 cents, but I think it starts with updating this plan so we can effectively be out there marketing it in the development communities. That's my 2 cents. And Taylor, I agree with you too. Once that's done, we need to align it with incentives to get the right type of businesses in.
So I would say yes and to most everything that's been stated. I would like to see food carts with some sort of a building there in the west end. I think we could get 4 or 5 of them there. My only caveat or hesitation would be, I heard 4 stories. I have a really difficult time with 4 stories there. I think we stay in here, well, 3, I think is what we've got with Cannery Square, or Cannery. And that's it.
So I agree with everything, and then just what Renee said. I don't know about the food carts. I thought we said we needed at least an acre of land down in Old Town to fit what we were trying to do, and I don't think that site's probably an acre, but I don't know.
Well, let me ask this because,
Wait, I was,
oh, sorry. I thought that was it.
no, and so, but I think we've said all along that west, that we definitely, whatever we put there, we didn't want to block our beautiful art center, so, yeah, something smaller, and then.
Okay, so on this side, would a 4-story towards the back of this lot, would you feel the same of that? Because, I mean, you're not blocking a view from, like, it's the city hall is the view currently. And so I don't know that you're really, but I just wondered if it made a difference where that building was. If it was just along this side, would you feel the same about it?
Doesn't match what's already in Old Town, but
I know
if
it
anything,
probably
that would
feels
be
too
the.
big, yeah, it probably does feel too big, but yeah.
I think 3
I
is
think
certainly
3
fine.
Yeah.
I mean, 3 is the same height as this building.
Yeah, the only, my only caveat would be if somebody said, okay, well, it doesn't make sense to do a hotel there because it's only 3, or an apartment service because it's only.
If I don't want it 4, I can figure out a way to make it work.
But that's what, or if it's, you know, I don't know, yeah.
I don't think you should, I'm of the opinion, I'm not flat against the idea. It might mean that you might need that to support, you know, that part of the vision. I don't know.
It's not gonna tower above any, like the apartments are 3, the city hall is essentially a 3-story height building.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that if this bill that we're talking about later passes in Salem,
You get an extra story.
you get an extra story in all of Old Town, and you can get rid of all retail on the ground floor potentially. And all the stuff get tore down and just put up as housing.
Okay. All right.
So.
That's a conversation
Since
for
we
that.
have
That's not for this, but
2 more work session items, do you guys have good direction?
Yes, yeah, very clear. Thank you.
Thanks.
we'll close this one.
All right, so the URA board, work session is adjourned. Brad, are we keeping on the same recording or?
Oh, we're
Okay.
gonna do this next?
All right, so I call the order of the city council work session for February 20th, 24. The first item of business is the Brooklyn sanitary trunk line reimbursement district presentation.
Yeah, look, they're all there. They're all just waiting.
Oh, all right, I didn't even have time to hot seat it. Down here.
We're just standing outside waiting.
Oh, you were?
The longer I wait, the harder it's like. Roll with that, I'll give you the.
So Brad, I didn't hear the answer to Kim's question. Are we using the same Zoom for the work session?
Say that again.
Are we using the same Zoom for the work session?
Yeah, for the work session.
Thank you.
Good to see you. It's the same.
Who is that? Oh, excuse me.
The revisioning is when more of that stuff will get figured out anyways, so.
Yeah.
It's not as.
You ready?
Yeah.
All right, first I wanted to, Jason Waters, city engineer, Andy Braun with Clean Water Services, and we also have Doug Gresham, principal engineer with Clean Water Services. Here you go, Doug. The title of the work session mentioned reimbursement districts, but we're not gonna be getting into detail on the reimbursement districts. We're just providing you with a project update. On the status, their Clean Water Services is getting ready to bid the project and they're pushing Brooklyn forward, which is great news. So it's more of a project update, status report, and then go over the financials, and then we'll hit, it's a lot, our share is a little bit less than Craig and I were predicting last year. So we're happy about that. It's great news, yes. Not over 2 million, so we may not even want to have as much of a reimbursement district discussion as we thought we would last year. So give you an update and then we'll integrate that with the budgeting and CIP update process. Just a reminder, the Brookman sanitary sewer trunk line project actually size-wise should have been managed by the city of Sherwood. It's a new line though. It goes through wetlands. It's got a lot more right of way. It's a lot more complex. And it needed a lot more horsepower to deliver. So CWS is delivering Brookman project. And the city is actually, instead of that project, we're delivering the Rock Creek sanitary trunk line project, phases 1 and 2, which is an existing line. It is over 15 inches. Traditionally, that project would have been managed by Clean Water Services, but it's straightforward. And so we're working with Contour on that project. And I would say we're about 1 season behind this project to do that project. I've introduced a project team here. So no reimbursement district discussions here in detail. So I'm going to pass it over to Andy Braun here to provide you an update on the financials and the status of the project.
I did appreciate the FAQs that got sent out though, explaining the reimbursement. You guys put together some really nice handouts.
Good.
It's helpful.
Okay, so again, my name is Andy Braun. I'm the engineering planning, capital planning division manager at Clean Water Services. I've been there for, gosh, a long time, 20 years. So I've been involved with Craig and Jason on many projects over the years. So thank you for inviting us in tonight. Happy to give you a project update on the Brookman project. We're really happy that we're coordinating and cooperating and partnering on this delivery of this project. Doug is here to answer questions about project specific things. I'm more of the financial guy behind this. So, okay, so talking a little bit about this project, just again, a reminder about why we're doing it and our involvement. Thank you, Jason, for providing that background about why is the district Clean Water Services managing a project that it would normally be a Sherwood project. But so the interest for Sherwood here, service, this expansion. This is a large project, about 2 miles of sewer extension and a lot of sensitive corridor. But for Sherwood, it's really providing service to the new high school that's been on a temporary pumping system and will be until we get this project done. Future service for part of Sherwood West and service for the Brookman area that came into UGB a number of years ago. Clean Water Services is bringing that project management piece of it, implementation and financing. So again, just a reminder about the scope and the size of this project. I mentioned it's about 2 miles long, ranges from 12-inch sewer down to, or up to 21-inch at the downstream end. Starts or next to the new Middlebrook subdivision that was constructed here a couple of years ago. And which is, adjacent to the longtime existing city limits. And then follows Cedar Creek. Probably a better name for this would have been the Cedar Creek Trunk Sewer Extension, but because it's serving the Brookman area, calling it the Brookman Trunk. Follows Cedar Creek, then crosses over to Goose Creek, crosses both the railroad and Old Pacific Highway, then crosses Pacific Highway, follows up on the other side of 99W, and eventually up to the not quite to the roundabout, but at Elward Road. We crossed 15 properties in addition to the highway and railroads. Yes.
Yeah, the easy, no problem railroad tracks.
Yeah, railroads are always easy to deal with, as long as you start about 10 years ahead of time. So just talking a little bit about the schedule, and I know this has been an exciting one. It's been going on for a while, but we didn't capture the timeline going too far back, but some of the more recent things to get us to where we are today with the permitting, finishing up the design, which happened early this winter. We're working on the easement acquisition with the property owners, those 15 property owners that we've talked with. Very excited about this next one. That's the bid opening that's coming up here in a week, 29th. We are going to have a reimbursement district open house. So we've had a number of open houses throughout the design, preliminary design, and as we've gotten closer to the final design.
You had a lot of attendance.
Attendance hasn't been great. Sometimes we've gotten as many as 25, 30 people there. We had a couple that we had 2 or 3, but certainly wanted to open that up and enable the owners in the area to come in and share their feelings about the project and provide some input. We certainly want to be sensitive to the owners, answer their questions, and we've made some design alterations in response to some of their comments. So this next open house on March 20th is really going to focus on the reimbursement district. I think we've made it pretty well known to the owners that they will have a financial share of this. But this is really the chance to talk a little bit more about this. This will be a Clean Water Services administered reimbursement district. Most of these properties are outside the city limits right now. So the reimbursement district process will actually go through Clean Water Services. We will have the public hearings, which will be in Hillsborough in front of our board of directors. And then, so those public hearings probably won't take place until this summer. And we will have an IGA and a governmental agreement with you, kind of laying out the obligations of both the district and the city. And we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. And then very excited about the next part, and that is the construction, which we anticipate starting up this spring. Probably going to be a 2-season construction period for this. And then even after construction is completed, and before it's ultimately done, and then even continuing beyond, is the restoration period. So talk a little bit about the financing of this. We're talking about roughly a $13 million project. We're keeping our fingers crossed. Every project that we've opened bids on, every public entity that's opened bids on them, they keep coming in high. So hopefully we're conservative here, but that's our rough estimate right now. You can see the different categories that we've broken it down into there. Obviously the largest one is the construction, which is about $10.5 million. So now we talk about the cost. Well, where is that money coming from? So really 3 primary sources of funding for this. And the first one that I'll mention there is the Clean Water Services, the system development charges. And those are what we collect every time a new connection is made onto the sewer system. throughout anywhere in the district, in the cities, unincorporated areas. 96% of that money comes to Clean Water Services. So I know that's always an issue that you're wrestling with, is why is all of the SDC money that's happening in Sherwood going to Clean Water Services? This is where we turn around and we spend it back in the cities as well. So about roughly 37%, $4.75 million is coming out of that SDC pot that's administered by CWS. About 50% of the project will be passed on to the property owners through the reimbursement district at the time that the owners recognize the benefit. So either connection or development happening. And then there is a local Sherwood share for it. Fortunately, that's and as I throw out these percentages, the IGA will actually lay out what the costs are. So don't get locked on 13%. Those will adjust, but this is giving you kind of order of magnitude. So hopefully we're under $2 million. Again, we'll see when the actual bids are received and we actually do the breakdown. Roughly the cost of it. I mentioned the IGA and just what our responsibilities of both entities are. So we'll be coming back with this. It will be signed both by you and our board of directors. But generally, the district Clean Water Services, I want to say that when I say district, sometimes I'm referring to Clean Water Services, but in this, because we're talking reimbursement districts, I have to stop and go back and clarify sometimes. So Clean Water Services responsibilities, again, managing the design, the implementation of the project, acquiring the easements, the regional financial obligation. So that regional piece is that collection of the SDCs and the use of SDCs, and that's really for the oversizing. So the local share, what we call it, is really for the cost of construction up to a 12-inch diameter line. And then when we get over 12-inch, that's the regional responsibility. Again, service for unincorporated areas. Much of this area so far is unincorporated. Certainly in Sherwood's urban planning area agreement, and this development happens, that will happen through the Sherwood processes. But for right now, it's outside the city.
And the IGA will state that Clean Water Services cannot connect customers that are not in the city limits.
Yes, so I'm not sure if that will be in the IGA. It is certainly in our land use permit that they require that we not provide urban services outside the urban growth boundary.
Yes, perfect. One place or the other is good enough.
Yeah, we'll have it documented.
That was also nicely put in their FAQ. I read that part.
Well, because some of those folks are involved in the reimbursement district, that can potentially be a contentious issue. Like, you're charging me, but I don't have the ability to connect. And again, they don't have to pay anything until they take advantage of it. And then also that we will be following the principles of the urban planning area agreement, which is essentially development that would take place can't just happen with Clean Water Services. That will all go through the city of Sherwood. So it's really going to be a cooperative arrangement throughout the life of this project. As some of these developments in the Brookman area will happen, that will come through Sherwood. And by the time they pay their permit fees, they are going to be paying them and going through the permit processing with the city. So part of this agreement is going to be we'll administer the reimbursement district, but you'll end up collecting the fees and then turning around and reimbursing us what you collect from the owners. Then again, just looking at the Sherwood obligations, again, you've been partnering, Jason, and your staff has been partnering with us throughout this project as we've been working on it the last few years in project development, review and approvals. Partnering in the public involvement, you've been great coming to all the public hearings that we've had. A lot of questions that we get at those are really city-based questions, and we don't want to be answering on behalf of the city. So we really appreciate your involvement at that. The financial shares we talked about, and those will probably be billable as we complete those segments. And I just mentioned collecting the CWS reimbursement as those fees come into the city, but for part of the RD. And then ultimately, accepting ownership of this. This is a line that is not, we define the regional lines as ones that are 24 inches in diameter or larger. None of this is actually 24 inch. So as annexations take place and these areas come into the city, you will actually become owners of these lines, and you would then take over the operation and maintenance of these lines.
Including the area further south that's currently outside the Brookman service area.
Yeah, so that area, presumably we will continue to own until it comes into the city. Craig's worked for a long time with our operations folks. We end up working closely together on what really makes sense to maintain. Sometimes if we get down to 2 district lines among this 2 miles, 2 segments, sometimes there's some horse trading that they do to make for efficiency of operations. We'll call it.
And you mean city limits or urban growth boundary?
So as areas are annexed into the city limits, the city will become the owners of it. Yes. If
There's an extension on that goes beyond the Brookman area, what the city can grow into. So that would stay in the Clean Water Services ownership. Little loop.
So that's really the updates that we wanted to give you today. Happy to answer any questions about either the financing, the project, anything else you would.
Mayor?
On mute.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to get the button going there. Thank you for the update. I had a couple questions, and thank you for coming in today. In terms of the sizing of the pipes, can you talk a little bit about how you're doing that? I'm assuming that you're sizing it based on, what a future, what Brookman's going to look like in the future, and assuming that Sherwood West gets completely built out. But are you looking even beyond that in terms of, what's going to, I'm just kind of asking this question in terms of, we're going to have to upgrade this pipe in 30 or 40 years, or how do you look at that sizing?
Yeah, great question. No, we certainly look out to full potential build out. These sewers, while we say a 50-year design life, we certainly hope they last much longer than that. So we really look at the tributary area. There are some Oregon laws and how far we can look out. We really can't plan for rural reserves. We certainly plan for both urban reserve areas and undesignated areas. And actually, we have a map here which shows the planning area for this sewer. So you see some fairly large basins, but then some areas beyond the urban growth boundary, south of Brookman. You can see there Basin 5, Basin 11, Basin 9. Those are all areas that will be tributary to this line, and we have sized it. The line itself will not be extended to those areas now, but in the future it will be, and it's been sized for those. Good question, Mayor.
All right, yeah, thank you. I'm just a little curious about that. And Basin 2, that's just basically following the topography, because Sherwood West out in that area, it actually extends a little farther than that. I guess would be the western side where that dotted line is. So you're basically looking at where everything's gravity flow.
Correct. Yes. Same thing with Basin 1. There's the purple colored area there. As you go further west, it's still in the urban reserve area in Sherwood West, but actually drains towards Chicken Creek.
And I know you're not talking about this today, but you're also looking at that forced main along Roy Rogers.
Yes.
And I'm assuming you're sizing it the same way, looking at the basins over on that side.
That's correct. Yes. So the pump station that will eventually be built out there and those force mains are sized to handle again, the urban reserve area, the whole planning area, what would be tributary to that pump station.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone have any questions?
Excited that we're at this point in the project. Appreciate the update. And fingers crossed on bid opening.
Yes.
When's the bids due by?
29th.
Fingers crossed.
I had a question. On your timeline, it looked like years 25 to 29, the restoration, maintenance and monitoring, what does that entail? Can you get more detail on that?
Sure. So when we build the sewer line, it's going down through a lot of sensitive areas near the streams and that, and through wetlands. We have to restore those areas and we have permit requirements to monitor the plantings, make sure that they're established and growing well. So we'll take several years of monitoring those, coming out several times a year, taking pictures, removing invasive species, planting more plants if we need to, and submitting that information back to the state that we're in compliance with permits.
Basically putting it back to the shape it was in prior to digging in.
Or better.
Or better.
And that's even if we take over part of that, like if we take over a portion of the line, because on Brookman, you're still doing the restoration?
Yeah, we'll have to finish the permit conditions.
Okay.
That's another reason they ran the project. They have a lot of wetland buffer, wetland scientists and on staff. And so it's more of an environmental restoration maintenance requirement for permits.
So we're thankful for that, sounds like.
Yes, oh yeah.
Yeah, we're hiring a contractor to build the sewer line, but a lot of that restoration work will be done by CWS forces that do that all over the district. So they do that in-house.
All right, well, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is the Sherwood West update. We'll swap seats again. We didn't plan that well.
You don't need us back to back.
That's true, we gotta take a break.
Yeah, so get these
Here
guys
comes
out of here.
Saves the day.
Doing all the steps for me. Thank you. Thank you.
There you go.
All right, yep, no worries, thank you. So, yeah, here to talk about Sherwood West, joined by Bruce. Joy's behind me as well. Joy was involved in this refinement project. So here to talk about a refinement study that we did to the Sherwood West concept plan. If you recall, you accepted the concept plan in July. We were able to just push, if you will, the planning a little bit further, especially for the North District. And the goal was to try and get it as development ready as possible. And so we brought on a consultant, McKinsey, for that. We also were able to squeeze in some of the feedback we got during the work sessions. Councilor Mays had some really good input on questions on cost estimates. And so we're able to update those numbers as well and really get more refinement, more accuracy through this study. So just really quickly schedule February 20th, we're at today. Next week on the 27th, we'll go to the Washington County Board of Commissioners, staff will, and just give an update on Sherwood West at a work session, kind of show the final plan, bring in this refinement study as well, take any questions. And just like we do, that's going to prepare us to go forward with a resolution of support with the Washington County Board of Commissioners in April. March 5th be our next city council meeting. We will bring forward a resolution to re-accept this concept plan with the refinement study. We'll also be bringing forward the IGA that's required with the county as part of the application. Basically what that is a transportation IGA. It basically says we will cooperate with each other on funding and access and all that sort of stuff. And then we will also be looking for your blessing to actually submit the application to Metro in the concept plan final form.
When you say that, that's the request to expand urban growth boundary application?
Yeah, and so that the April 5th is our full application to Metro to expand the urban growth boundary. And we're gonna request that you guys give staff that blessing on March 5th.
March 5th.
March 5th. And then we're gonna apply on April 5th.
After we apply, can we rescind or amend our application?
Based on what Metro has said, yes.
Based on what they have said?
And that was, I think yes.
Okay.
I don't
know if I'll be ready by March fifth. Because of this House bill, I don't want to derail this work session, but that bill would,
Well, we're gonna talk about that, Bill.
okay, I'll shut
We
up.
added it.
And I think I'll circle back with Metro, just, between now and March fifth, I'll circle back with them and, let them know kind of. If that seems appropriate, I'll just really make sure what that looks like, but we've asked them this before, I think you've raised the question.
Yeah, I think the way I would want to know is. Whenever the final point of no return, I want to know what that is, so that I can. Either definitively act or not act ahead of that time, or we can definitively act or not act ahead of that time based on what we know.
And I think
or don't know.
I think it's a valid question because the state legislator, we're asking you to act before the state acts. And so I think, we're asking you to make a decision and you have concerned about it pending, legislation with.
That changes everything for me, so.
So let me ask probably a naive question, though. If, let's say this bill wasn't on the table, they could introduce this same type of bill next year or the year out, right? And so. Sure. I don't know that we're in any more danger or left it, but I get your point, but it seems like. Either it's the right thing to ask for it or not, and then if they're gonna play games with laws, then we gotta fight them as they come up, because even if they say no to it. Next year, they would say yes to a similar one, so.
April 5th is the final date.
April fifth is our deadline to submit to Metro. Yeah, and the reason we're bringing this.
April fifth, right?
April 5th, what did I say? Sorry.
Just staring at the March fifth, so I was reading it, but it's not.
And the reason we're bringing this on March fifth is because the county, we need to have the county needs to know what our final plan looks like before they give us a letter of support. And so, they need about 3 weeks before they get this on their calendar for the full resolution. So that's why we're bringing it to you. We're just barely gonna make it on April 2nd. We're gonna go to the county and then we're gonna turn that right around into a full application to Metro.
Hey, what if we want to change the boundaries of our ask? Would we want to do that now, if we get this blessing from on April 2nd, and then we say, wait, we want to. Now we only want to ask for the northern part and not the whole thing, we have to start all over again, or can we even do that?
I'll be really open with you guys from a staff level, from my perspective. We're pretty far into this process. It would be. I'll entertain anything you guys want, but it would be really, really, really difficult to modify the application at this point and still make the April 5th deadline. Well, we have letters of support that are in for the full ask. We kind of have to go back out and change the plan a little bit. And so I think what that looks like is, without getting into your guys' policy, submit a full application and see if we can revise it in the future. I mean, we can come with options. I think there's options, right? But it would be difficult.
Yeah, it's important to know in this case, you submit an application as a city, if we do that. 1,000 things could change. Namely, Metro would come back and say, hey, we like this plan, and they suggest that they'll only do it if we change this and this and this. And then the city can respond and say, oh, go pound sand, we're just not gonna do it. Or, well, then we come back and say, when we revise it to something different. So there's a lot of things that could happen.
Yeah, I agree.
Mayor?
Yep.
Eric, when you talk to Metro about Doug's question around, when can we change things or stop or whatever, you should ask the question too, like if we submit on the 5th and then later on, based on what happens in Salem, decide we want to reduce the ask, can we reduce it even after the 5th? That would be a great question to ask. And if I remember right, you're going to be going into what this the governor's housing bill looks like right now, because it's got some stuff in it that's very troubling that I think we all need to be thinking about.
Yep.
All right, why don't we jump into that?
Yep.
So that we can.
Yep. Okay. So it's SB 1537, this short session. really what we're zeroing in on for implications for Sherwood West is the section 38, which is the mandatory adjustments. And so basically what this is takes away the control of the city to really deny variances for housing in most cases. And so right now we have a variance section. There's clear criteria. We will give you the variance to our standard if you meet this criteria. And it's up to us whether they meet that criteria or not. So we have a lot of discretion in terms of adjusting the code, the underlying code for housing right now. What this bill would do is basically say, here's all the adjustments that a city is basically required to approve. And there's very, very little criteria for us, whether or not we can say no to it. So that's the high level. So again, it has to, in order for a developer applicant to qualify under this section, it has to be for net new housing. So it's not your neighbor doing an expansion. It has to be new housing, housing production.
And it could be a building could be a piece of property that has something on it, and then they level it, remove it all.
And as long as there's net new units.
So anything in Old Town, you get bought, torn down. And
Yes, there's a few requirements for being able to qualify. One of them is net new housing. Really, all housing types are included, single family, mixed use, manufactured dwelling parks, ADUs, all of it's included. I think the biggest and most difficult threshold that needs to be met is 17 units per acre net. And so right now in our code, I'll go over in just a second, but a lot of detail here, but it's basically our high density zone, all of our middle housing development in current city limits. Basically what our code says right now is there's no density standard for middle housing in all of our zones. It depends on how we actually implement Sherwood West, whether or not a developer could get up to 17 units per acre in a middle housing development.
so explain that again.
But does it have to, for them to qualify, do they have to meet all three of those first criteria? Or just one of them?
All three of them.
Okay, so if they're building something that's net new, is any type of housing and is more than 17 units per acre, then they can wipe away all of our codes, basically.
Yes, and they just have to state one of the three at the bottom apply.
It'll be cheaper, right? Every time.
The law, as far as I'm not an attorney, but the way I read the law is they don't have to demonstrate, they have to state that.
State number two, everything will be number two, like. If I can weigh the standard, it's cheaper, boom,
Yeah.
done.
Can you go back to that slide, please? I just want to read those three again. Sorry.
Yeah, there you
Okay, thanks.
What can they get an adjustment to really quickly? Side or rear setback, 10%, open space requirement, 25%, parking minimums, minimum lot size, 10%, building height maximum of either 1 story or 20%, whatever is greater. So they are allowed 1 story if 20% doesn't get them a story. Unit density maximums to account for other adjustments, meaning that if they're hitting the density limit but an additional floor would get them more density, then they can also adjust the density to accommodate the other adjustments. If that makes sense. Prohibition of a requirement for a residential use on the ground floor of a mixed use building, with the exception of one face of the building that faces the street and is within 20 feet of the street. The code, right, the law right now says mixed use building. It doesn't say mixed use zone, but I think it's fair to interpret this as sort of in favor of a housing developer as you can get. So we assume that our mixed use zone, if a developer comes in and proposes a mixed use building, that's going to trigger this requirement.
They could wipe away that. code
And in our
requirement.
commercial zone, mixed use is a permitted use.
All of our commercial zones are mixed use, and we did recently do a code update. I'm sure you guys remember, most of you, that prohibited this
Residential.
actually because of some of the proposals that we got. And so this takes away that ability to enforce that code section. Yes.
So Eric, as far as Sherwood West goes, that would apply to any like mixed use little retail zones that we'd want to do like they did in Villebois.
It would apply to any zone or building that allows mixed use. So if it's a commercial zone and it allows residential, then yes, we could not prohibit residential uses on the ground floor, correct?
With that one exception,
Other than the.
street facing.
Street facing.
Yes, exactly. Other adjustments, I won't go through all of them, basically building design, facade materials, roof form, window material, window glazing, building.
All of our housing design standards that we put in place.
Um,
And
So,
build ugly boxes.
So Eric, on the facade, I mean, there's no, like, someone could come in and say, well, I don't want to do hardy plank, I'm gonna do the cheapest T111 siding I can find, and we wouldn't be able to stop that.
yeah, I think short answer is yes. The building code, meaning how much insulation you put in, electrical, code, all that still applies, but our exterior design standards, for the most part, get an exception to. Yes.
This would make that building across the street look like our French chateau. If everyone has waived away all of this, it would literally be a box. It would be a box. With the minimum number of windows, nothing else. If someone really wanted to take it to the maximum.
There is an exemption process for local governments. I'll just explain it really quickly. If we have in our code or we amend our code to meet these criteria, then we would be exempt from requiring all these adjustments. So we have to allow all the housing types that were listed. A developer has to be able to apply for an adjustment for all those housing types. We have to allow for all of the.
Only if they're building 17 units an acre.
It's a good question. I don't think it actually says that. So that's a great point. I haven't thought of, that's a great point. No,
Say that again, I want to digest that. Get where you're going with that.
Only if they're building 17 units an acre.
no, I don't, I mean,
I don't think
as it's
so.
writhen, no, I mean, I'll
I
double
think it's
check, but
based
no,
on-
I think.
I think that's the way they're gonna.
So that was- So you back up. Back up, back up.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, it doesn't state that. It doesn't state that in the bill. I'll read it again.
So it says we can get exemptions if we change our code to that stuff.
so if
It's not
they're
gonna
building
protect.
only 8 units an acre, they can get all these, they can.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I should back out a little bit. It basically requires us to comply with the law anyways. In order to get the exceptions, you have to add it all into your code.
So the exceptions are useless because you're basically setting up your code to
Yeah.
follow the same thing, so.
Okay, I apologize.
Anyway.
I was daydreaming and I listened in and then
I knew what you were thinking, but it's not.
And just a little history, as we were working with the governor's office and the league was working with the governor's office, we asked for a process that said, if you can show that you haven't denied a variance in a certain amount of time, that you'd be exempt from this rule. And they originally were very agreeable to that. And some early drafts of the concept included that in it. In fact, Eric, I think that actually came from Sherwood, that idea, but then it evolved over time into this, which is basically an exception because you're already following all their rules.
You're already giving them everything they want.
They had, the original discussion was just number 3, which is the city has approved 90% of adjustment requests for housing in the last 5 years. Basically showing we're not a bad actor in terms of housing. And we qualify for this. We've done the research, we had our tech do the research. We've approved 100% of variances for housing in the last 10 years. And I'll just, as an anecdote, there was a very unpopular project on Sherwood Boulevard. It's going to be constructed soon. We got a lot of pushback from the community. Planning Commission approved, because the variances allowed the housing. We need more housing. I think all of us agree. We need more housing in our community. Sherwood has not been a bad actor. But yes, they did add these other requirements. Basically, we have to comply with the bill anyways. I'd say, this 90% over 5 years, it really comes into play in much larger communities where they're crossing a lot of variances. And then it gives you a 10% discretion, basically, to deny 10% of them. We don't get all that many. And so as soon as we deny one, we're gonna be in hot water, basically.
But they threw in.
But the other thing is
too,
make
so
it,
doesn't matter.
doesn't matter anyway.
0.3 is just lipstick.
So, I think everyone kind of gets the gist of the bill for Sherwood West, you know, in term drilling down on the 17 units per acre. You know, right now we have our multifamily zone, it goes up to 24, and we have our cottage cluster, which goes up to 16. You can see really easily how they're gonna get up into the 17 with some adjustments. And that allows the change to the density. And so these are the two zones that I think are gonna be most impacted. And
Essentially wipe out our whole cottage cluster planning that we did.
it would in terms of design. They did carve out an exception at the request of Mayor Rosener. Actually, they did carve out an exception and said you can't get the height bonus for cottage clusters. And so that maintained the the age in place, if you will, approach to the cottage clusters.
Wouldn't this bill allow them to come into, let's say, the medium high zone? And say, hey, we have this proposal to hit 17 units per acre, not 11, and
Just go up.
They can only get the density up to 17 if the other, and qualify for all these adjustments, if the other adjustments allow them to get up to 17 with lot size or whatever it is. So
get there.
and I think
You don't think so? You've done the math?
No, I disagree with Eric because
no, please,
we're asking you, medium high density assumes 5.5 to 11 units per acre if it's built according to our standards, but if they substitute
That's what I'm getting
regular
at.
units for quadplexes or any other middle housing, they will at that point exceed
correct.
17 units per acre, so every.
Then,
However,
however,
and so all the zones can hit 17 units per acre if every single unit is a middle housing unit.
Correct,
However.
correct. However, and you weren't privy to all these work sessions. If we do the master planning approach and we're able to basically not allow middle housing within then we have some cover there.
In Sherwood West, but
Yes, in
not in
Sherwood
the
West.
rest of the community.
Correct,
Did
correct,
The rest of the
we
community
get that?
is screwed.
correct. We're talking about Sherwood West.
Did we
Correct.
get that question answered as to whether or not that master plan,
overrides.
override is gonna, this bill doesn't
Super.
trump that?
Not for, so.
I know we submitted that question to them, right?
We haven't gotten a response. But I think in terms of what zones within Sherwood West are going to be impacted. If we do the master plan for the residential areas and then we say, okay, cottage cluster and townhomes, et cetera, are here within the master plan. Here is your medium density, high neighborhood, that's single family plus ADUs plus duplexes, actually. So yeah, no, we have to allow duplexes. So now we're talking actually middle housing. And so it's really only medium density neighborhood and low density. So we actually need more boxes in that. So because we allow duplexes, that basically doubles the density. Right?
Yeah, so I think,
There's a lot of detail there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of detail there, but
I think though that if you, and we can, both of us can do exercise, I think if you applied all of the adjustments that they wanted to get, you could probably get middle housing and medium high density housing or neighborhood up to 17. And
I think where you're seeing 11. I think there's kind of a lot that needs to be flushed out and that's gonna happen in the rulemaking. And I think that's the tough spot that we're in of like, how is this actually gonna play out? But for example, even if we do the master planned approach, we still have to allow duplexes in every zone.
Yeah.
And so I guess a question that I don't know is, does that duplex requirement allow you to exceed the density, that we have listed here? To be honest, I don't know. That's probably a question for Carrie.
Rulemaking is like a year later after the bill.
So, it's likely that half or potentially just more than half of our zones would be impacted by the bill.
Mayor, do you chime in?
Yeah, just a little more history. I mean, I want to give Eric and his team a lot of props because they did a great job of working with the governor's office for, gosh, Eric, the last, 5 to 6 months, and put a lot of good work in. And there was a concept on this bill that was actually a little better. It still had the variance stuff, but there was a lot of money in there for infrastructure and some other programs that we liked. But literally last week, 30 minutes before the hearing they dropped a -9 amendment and pulled most of that out. And voted it out of committee. So the bill as it stands right now is not great. Now, that being said, we are talking worst case scenario here. You know, we have to ask ourselves, would a builder actually come in and max all these out to 17 units per acre? Just to get those variances, it might be difficult to sell those types of units in that part of town. So that's something we need to consider as well. But it's not pretty. And just one thought on rulemaking. The rulemaking for HB 2001 and the rulemaking for CFAC did not go well for us, you know, so the rulemaking side of things has not been something that I would put a lot of hope on in terms of being favorable for the city.
Yeah, usually skews the other way.
Just for everyone to know, my vote on Sherwood West is at risk.
Ditto.
So what,
I'm really pissed at the governor.
It's actually worse than last year. Last year, they dropped a bill in the middle of the session that we didn't know about, and it ended up getting defeated. This year, we worked with them for half a year, and then they took away most of the work that we did with them and dropped the bill.
They just did a bait and switch at the end.
Yeah.
Not honest, not honorable.
I do believe that Matthew Scheibold from the governor's office was acting in good faith, though. I think he was really trying. I think it came from higher up.
so Eric, I have a question. We're gonna push up against council meeting, but we haven't even hit the refinement.
I can go quick on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to start on time. Council meeting can start anytime after 7.
Anything else on this? So I will follow up with Metro, and I think, you know, if we just want to keep the communication open regarding the March 5th, you know, without getting into quorum issues or anything like that.
I'm gonna have some questions for
Yeah.
offline.
Yep. So just really, I'll just go over this really quickly. This is some good news, actually. So, we did what we're calling the North District study, part of this refinement plan. Looked at, basically, we really wanted to drill down and get this North District as ready as possible. So we wanted to figure out, you know, is there opportunity to assemble large lots? Opportunity to bring in our target industries as a city, understand the cost in more detail. And then we also took a stab at some of the cost estimates for the entire planning area and for the, if you will. So just really quickly, what we're looking at, this is for the entire Sherwood West area, not just for the North District. And don't be too alarmed about these. I don't think they're all that scary, if you will, but we have an overall $18 million deficit for water, and we're talking regional infrastructure here, not local that a developer does. So like the Brookman trunk line we just talked about, $18 million shortfall for water, $32 million surplus for sanitary, $14 million deficit for storm, $8 million surplus for parks, and about an $18 million deficit for transportation. The biggest change between the original study and this study comes in transportation. Previously, we had a surplus of a significant amount. I think it's fair to say, based on our experience, we never have a surplus of funding for roads and transportation projects. And so I think this gets us to a much more accurate number. The consultant did a great job looking at this. I don't mind being very open with you. There were some errors, frankly, in our analysis. And we took a really close look at it and we updated it. So the consultant did a great job on that. Mainly, I'll just tell you what happened. For the mixed employment zones, we had 100% lot coverage, meaning that our TDTs were way up. We assumed 100% lot was going to be developed. Accurate is really like 35% of industrial sites actually get covered with the building. And so those numbers dropped the revenue pretty significantly. And a few other changes. I think the really good news for us, parks. So this actually includes all of the parks that are planned in Sherwood West in the 2021 Parks Master Plan. When we apply our base SDC rate, we cover the sports facility, other things like that based on current rates. So we took a closer look at the road alignment, and this is Elwood Road here, Roy Rogers Road here. The preferred alignment, if you will, for new streets is this new collector road connecting Elwood to Roy Rogers. and it avoids this green area, which is upland habitat. I think we still need to evaluate this and see if any is developable. What this did was left us with a 95-acre site here, if all of these were actually assembled. To be determined whether a developer or an owner can actually assemble all of them, but the opportunity is there based on the infrastructure. Which is, give you a example, what we're doing up there on the hill on Oregon Street and on TS Road, those are about 40-acre sites. And so this would be double what we're putting in. So fairly large site, if someone can assemble all of these.
A quick question on that. So if it's determined that any of the area south of there is developable, could it be potentially combined with that you get even more than 95 acres?
That would be my hope.
That's why I was thinking. That you could then move the road down a little bit, right, and capture that, if that's true.
There's about 50 acres on the south side.
Yeah.
Right now, actually, though, we have it zoned, only part of it is zoned for employment, the other is residential. And then on
The road could split it.
the road would be real. Right. On the west side, a little bit smaller lots, in terms of opportunity, given Elwood Road. Some natural resources in here I didn't highlight, but just a little bit smaller lots. I think we're saying between 12 and 30, roughly 30 acres is what we're getting on the east side. Won't go into detail here, just to show we're looking at sanitary, storm, transportation, and also sewer alignments. The key infrastructure improvements that we need, of course, we need to improve the road network, the intersections of Roy Rogers and Sherwood here at the corner, Sherwood and Elwert, widening of Elwert, and then this new collector are the key to serve the area. Water, fairly straightforward, 12-inch loop system. We can likely do an internal, local system that loops for phase development or partial development and bring it back down. So not the whole thing has to go at once. The biggest investment besides transportation is going to be sewer. CWS is planning what they're calling a force main within Roy Rogers Road, that then goes into Highway 99 and goes up to the Durham station.
They're building that.
They are building the portion in Roy Rogers Road now, and the portion in Highway 99 is a few years out. But we also need to get the pump station constructed as well. I think it's shown right now on our property. Obviously, we need to agree to that if it's going to go on our property. And then storm is fairly localized, not a lot of major infrastructure there. So that's what the infrastructure needs are looking like. Bruce is going to talk briefly about.
I saw him tap you on the arm.
About the target industry.
Well, first, I really am appreciative of the fact that McKinsey and Leland's an economics firm, did the study. McKinsey is, in my experience, well known in designing a lot of industrial parks. So I feel like we got some good evaluation on this. And what they're basically telling us is that they looked at this site. Is this a good site for what they call mixed employment? And I think the answer to that is this is a very strong site for mixed employment, industrial development. Basically, what they're saying is, considering the lack of land that we have within the urban growth boundary within the metro area, that this really creates an opportunity for a high quality buildable employment land within Sherwood, assuming that this gets approved. It also sees the opportunities for tech clusters. And they make the point that Sherwood is really centrally located between the Sunset Corridor, the Hillsborough area, and the Wilsonville Tech Corridor, and that companies and businesses are looking for alternative sites. They don't want to just look at one site in one city. They want to see that there's a lot of alternatives that they can consider. And we already have proven, I think, that we can draw in these kinds of companies into Sherwood, at least on the east side, from those experiences there. They see an opportunity for what it's been called mixed employment, and that means really long-term job creation, and what they call industrial flex and office type uses could come here. And what they're particularly seeing is opportunities for 20 to 100 acre Well, we can't get to 100 acre easily, but 20 to 100 acre technology related parks, you know, those kinds of developments. And that it's really going to be important that we work every way we can to preserve the larger parcels on the east, which creates the opportunity for the larger projects, and then west of where the opportunities for smaller projects to take place. There is a market. There's clearly a market for both. They also see that this makes sense in terms of the 2023 economic opportunities analysis that the council adopted back in I think June of 23. And it sees these target industries as making sense. Manufacturing, advanced manufacturing technology companies, what's called machinery manufacturing, which is metals machinery. I mean, that's aviation, that's robotics, that's a lot of, and advanced manufacturing is all these types of things, automation type industries. So it's the kind of industries that I think we are trying to encourage in the city. They talk about clean tech. There's a lot of other industry types that could make sense, not necessarily up in this area, but certainly within Sherwood West and elsewhere in the city. They also looked at they did a matrix of the size of different kinds of companies. High tech, clean tech manufacturing needs 5 to 100 acres. According to this, I think it's really a little larger than 5, but advanced manufacturing could be 5 to 25 acres. So there's a lot of flexibility, but we really do need to get as large sites as possible so that this area, particularly east of Elwood, can be planned. I think, you know, sort of in conclusion, they say the mixed employment area designated in the 23 concept plan is appropriate for long-term development of the city's target employment types, and the infrastructure can be constructed to serve the area in an orderly manner. So I found it to be a very positive report from a very well-respected firm.
Thank you, Bruce.
Couple questions, or comments, back on. Is there we were talking about before, we have a 95 acre contiguous, but maybe we could eke out a little bit more from the area below it. Is there a target? If we get to 100, does that a magic number as 120? Like, is there where something else becomes available that wouldn't, or becomes big enough for something else that we currently aren't big enough for, or?
Well, I think we need to get as much land as we can. There is a very serious shortage of industrial and manufacturing land in this region, and there is real demand for this to happen. So I don't know how to specifically answer that. I mean, this is really the only site that we have.
It's like, if we get to 110, does that all of a sudden, like, now it's big enough for X?
Other opportunities.
Right, but my second point was, going back to the next slide there, Eric. Keep going, sorry. One more. There we go. So implement strategies. Is there a way in like annexation agreements, maybe as an example, for those lots that are all in that 95 acre or maybe other areas too, where we can say, as part of the annexation agreement, you have to agree to bundle with your neighbors to create one parcel, or unless we waive that or something like that.
Yeah.
Or that's one thing I can think of.
Yeah. I think that's the benefit of the annexation policy we just did. Yeah. Yep.
I think we also need to pay attention because this area is in the county, and the county could get applications for dividing up property. So I think we need to be mindful of anything that could occur that might in fact reduce some of these parcel sizes, particularly in the east area of Elwood.
I don't see anything that.
I don't think anything's happening of that regard.
It's in our urban reserves.
We should
Counties can act on it.
we should be sending in, if the county has the ability to do something, we should submit a letter to them, or to them not to approve anything. Anyways.
Okay.
That confused me. I'm like, we're coming into RUGB, how can county?
Just to divide it.
Okay.
I'm still
Well,
fairly new to the
I think
order.
there's, I think there's some other barriers too, in terms of getting, if it's not in the city limits, getting water.
Yeah, you can't get services, no.
They can't get services.
Okay.
Councilor Scott, this doesn't look like 100 is really a magic. 5 is the magic number. You need 5 acres to do something.
I just was curious if there was like, after you get to 120, then all of a sudden Boeing wants to build a facility or something.
I don't think we know that. We just need to try to maximize the amount of land so that we can compete, in essence, for industry that is looking in this.
You can always chunk it. You can't.
And your point, we planning, we don't want others planning it for us.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, very helpful.
all right, let's take 4 or 5 minutes, and then I'll call the meeting about 7:15. Yes, and then